Welcome, friends. Today I want to share with you a few thoughts about Blavatsky's major work, The Secret Doctrine, focusing particularly on the kind of ethics that can be derived from this book. The Secret Doctrine was written by her, but we have reference from her teachers that they participated in the writing of this book. And although The Secret Doctrine is normally thought of as a book that contains cosmic and metaphysical teachings, one of the masters, the Mahatma K.H., said the truths and mysteries of occultism constitute indeed a body of the highest spiritual importance, at once profound and practical for the world at large. Yet it is not as a mere addition to the tangled mass of theories or speculation that they are given to you, but for their practical bearing on the interests of humanity. So all these occult teachings that we find in the Secret Doctrine are not meant to be just a system of thought, another philosophy. The masters that were behind the writing of this book are saying that these teachings are given to us for the practical bearing on the interest of humanity. So that means that the Secret Doctrine must contain teachings that can help humanity in a practical way. We have the words of another master of wisdom. We don't know who wrote this. Blavatsky published this in The Theosophist. And the master says, the problem of true theosophy and its great mission are first, the working out of clear and equivocal conceptions of ethic ideas and duties, such as shall best and most fully satisfy the right and altruistic feelings in humanity. So the problem of true theosophy is to work out clear ethical ideas that will satisfy the altruistic feelings in humanity. That's the first one. And second, he says, the modeling of these conceptions for their adaptation into such forms of daily life as shall offer a field where they may be applied with most equitableness. So the idea is that the universal principles that we find in the Secret Doctrine are actually the foundations for a kind of ethics, a kind of ethical worldview that is universal, that is not just conditioned by any particular culture. But what the Secret Doctrine gives us are the universal principles. We are the ones that have to turn these principles into that kind of universal ethics, and then to show people how these universal principles can be applied to daily life. So there are many teachings in the Secret Doctrine. What I want to present is an example of how we can apply some of the main conceptions that we find in this book, and try to encourage you in this way to work out your own ideas, to find how the different teachings in this wonderful book can be translated not only into ethical ideas, but also into ways of living, into ways of acting in our daily life. So the first idea that we are going to explore is the unity of all things. Anybody acquainted to some extent with theosophy knows that this idea is a foundational idea in all theosophical teachings, and of course, in the Secret Doctrine too. A couple of quotes, I will bring a quote or two for each principle just to illustrate it, but you can really find this throughout the book, all these ideas. There is a shloka that says there is neither first nor last, for all is one number, issued from no number. The Secret Doctrine here is talking about the development of cosmic diversity, from the oneness, and behind that oneness there is that which is beyond all description, definition, the absolute reality, which is the no number. But the idea here is that despite all diversity, we are all one. You can see in the second reference, the Secret Doctrine says, this refers to the non-separateness of all that lives and has its being, whether in active or passive state. Everything, whether manifested or in a state of latency, everything is one. There is no real separation. And this is really the foundation of a kind of universal ethics, because this means that everything, whether another human being or a mineral that we may say, well, I don't see any life in the mineral. Theosophy would say there is a latent or passive kind of life and consciousness there that we call chemistry, but this is actually the seed for what we call consciousness, as the structure of minerals continue to evolve and move on into other kingdoms of nature. That which we call chemistry develops into life and consciousness. So the idea here is that we should have a profound respect for everything because we are all one. Because whatever we do to anything in the world or to other people will produce repercussions in ourselves, in our own state of consciousness, in our own growth. So, at the beginning, that's how we can see it. We are still focused on ourselves. We are saying, I cannot be happy unless we have a harmonious relationship with everything, including the planet. Today, we see what happens when we abuse the planet, what we may call the nature, the part of nature that is not sentient, which we are going to see Theosophy rejects that notion. But it is clear that everything that happens in the world will have repercussions on ourselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So we may begin with this idea from that more self-centered point of view. I cannot be happy unless I work for the happiness of everything. But then we need to move on beyond that and realize I am not this little piece of the cosmos. When I say I am the totality. This is something that all real mystics actually experience in consciousness. Their mystical experiences are that they are actually everything and that everything is within them. And this is the quality of nature for every one of us separate, that all of us are one. So this is something that an earnest theosophy will want to meditate on and to try to gradually mold his or her life from the point of view of this oneness. Another important teaching is the teaching of what is real and what is unreal from the point of view of the worldview that is proposed in the Secret Doctrine. A quote that we find there is, the phenomenal universe with everything in it is called illusion, which in Sanskrit is Maya, because all is temporary therein, from the ephemeral life of a firefly to that of a sun, compared to the eternal immutability and changelessness of the one. The universe with its evanescent, ever-changing forms must necessarily be no better than a will-o'-the-wisp in the mind of a philosopher. So the idea is that because our true nature is eternal, anything that we experience in the field of time is a temporary experience. It's not what we really are, who we really are. So when we say that it's unreal, we are not saying that it does not exist. We are saying that it's temporary, and also that we are perceiving it wrongly. Because we don't perceive the unity and the eternity behind things, we get attached to separate objects, to separate experiences from the point of view that we are separate individuals. And then we feel that we lose these objects or relationships or situations, and that we gain those or these. And all this is a misconception, because in our real nature, we are complete. We are the totality, and we are eternal. We have eternal relationships with everything else, because we are actually one with everything else. So if we go through life taking as real the transitory things that the world offers, we are going to be prone to have a selfish, self-centered, aggressive attitude, because I want this, I don't want that, I want to win, to be better than another person or whatever else. But if we understand that all this diversity is not the reality, is here for a purpose, as we are going to see, the theosophical tradition doesn't propose that this is just a useless illusion, just a mistake. There is a purpose for this. We will see that. But when we realize what is the real and what is the unreal, our relationship with life, people, situations changes completely. This is similar to the case of a game. You engage in a game, and when you are in the game, you want to play the game, you want to play well. And while you are within the game, you respect the rules of the game. But you always keep in mind that that is not your real life. That is just a temporary experience you are having. And whatever happens in the game ends in the game, when the game ends, and you continue with your real life. So similarly, with the difference between the cosmos and our true nature, which is one of the and the other ideas that is important in the secret doctrine that we will see. Similarly, we are engaged in a game, and when we realize that this is a game, metaphorically speaking, we can relate to the game of life in a completely different way. Now, this game is not a random game. There are rules, there are laws. In science, there is the idea that the cosmos is a result of random physical and chemical reactions. But the secret doctrine proposes that the universe is intelligent, that there are no blind laws, that there is no dead matter. Blavatsky says, for example, the whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform, and who, whether we give them one name or another, and call them the Anchohans or angels or devas, each one of them are the messengers, in the sense only that they are the agents of karmic and cosmic laws. So in the theosophical view, all laws in the cosmos are mediated by intelligent beings. Of course, their intelligence is different from that in human beings. Human beings are whimsical, are self-centered, are driven by their desires. Human beings often depart from their duty because they are pushed by their emotional nature, desire or attraction, repulsion, etc. The celestial beings we are talking about have a different kind of consciousness. They find joy and fulfillment in helping nature develop, grow, and this idea of a universe of purpose will be the next idea that we talk about. So the point here is that everything that we see around that may look on the physical plane like a blind force, chance reactions, chemical reactions, physical interactions, or things that happen in blind matter, when we can see from a point of view closer to the real, we see that there is intelligence behind. So when we start looking at the world and the physical plane in general and the cosmos as a place that is being ruled by intelligences, again, without anthropomorphizing those intelligences, without transferring our own way of consciousness, our own modes of consciousness onto these celestial beings. But when we understand that everything is moved by intelligences, then we can have a different relationship with life in general. A relationship where we understand that there is a reason why things happen. And this is the next big idea that we find in the Secret Doctrine, the idea that we live in a universe of purpose. Let me read a quote. Blavatsky says, "The whole order of nature evinces a progressive march towards a higher life. There is design in the action of the seemingly blindest forces. The whole process of evolution, with its endless adaptations, is a proof of this. The immutable laws are all working toward the grand end." So because the universe is intelligence, that intelligence has a purpose. There is, as Blavatsky says, there is a purpose in the action of all forces of nature. And the purpose is that we fully express our true divine nature on all planes of the cosmos, and that we can realize in practice the divine nature that we have in latency. So everything that happens in the cosmos, a cosmos that may seem chaotic, that may seem cruel at times, that may seem puzzling, when we can understand the purpose of all this life and activity, that is the purpose of evolution. And when we understand how evolution proceeds, what is necessary for things to evolve, we start understanding why things happen the way they do in the world and in the cosmos in general. And this gives us the ability to begin to cooperate with life. If we think that life, there is no intelligence behind the things that happen in life, that whatever happens in life is random, that there is no particular purpose for what happens in life. When we have that point of view, we end up having the kind of relationship with life and the world that we see in our culture today. The idea of maximize pleasure and possessions and gain and success and power, because there is no other purpose in life, because this is the only chance that we have in life to exist and to develop ourselves. And this is the tragedy of modern humanity, that the scientific view that many of us in humanity have adopted is a view that leaves us empty of a higher purpose. At the same time, religion in general has failed to provide a rational guidance, because often religions are just impositions of beliefs. The Secret Doctrine is trying to present to you a rational view of the universe, but that is not materialistic, that is beyond what the senses can perceive. And this is the next big idea in the secret doctrine that we are going to explore. But basically, when we understand that there is purpose in life, we begin to be able to cooperate with life. Things that we experience have a purpose. Whether those experiences bring us pleasure or pain, they are both valuable. And if we cooperate with both, if we take them intelligently, then we will grow and we will gradually realize our divine nature, which is the real source of eternal peace, eternal joy, eternal harmony, etc. Understanding that what happens in life has a purpose helps us have a sense of cooperation, as I said, and surrender, an intelligent surrender to the divine, because the intelligence that is moving life comes from the universal mind, comes from a far wiser and all-encompassing intelligence that our minds cannot really grasp at this point. We will be able to grasp that universal mind when we attain what is called sometimes enlightenment. So if we take everything that happens in life from this as a form of training, as a form of education, as a form of purifying our nature, then all this helps us realize our true nature. And this, as I said, is the next big idea in the secret doctrine, that we have a higher nature. You know, in our scientific and materialistic outlook in our current culture, we tend to think that the physical body is the real me. Even if people think that there is some spiritual nature to them, they often think of their real me as their physical, emotional, and mental aspects, and the spirit or the soul or the spiritual nature is some attachment that is up there, something that is added to the real me, that is this personality. Now, the secret doctrine proposes a reversal of that view. We read there, analyzing and classifying the human being, just as a terrestrial animal, may be left to science. But man's inner spiritual, psychic, or even moral nature cannot be left to the tender mercies of an ingrained materialism, especially when we come to his higher capacities and perceptions. So in the theosophical tradition, we say that human beings are a kingdom that is different from animals, from the animal kingdom. In science, human beings are just another form of animals. And that is fine, that is correct from the point of view of the body. But what the secret doctrine is proposing is that we are far more than the body. And because we have active certain spiritual principles that are still in the process of developing in the animal kingdom, human beings are a kingdom of their own. And as human beings, what differentiates us from the animals are not the physical pleasures, are not the physical body, physical activities. What makes us human is the development of the spiritual, psychic, in the sense of psychological, the psyche, our mind and emotions, and our moral nature. Sometimes people say, well, we are after all animals, and you see the struggle for survival in animals, in nature. You see competition and aggression. And so why would we just adhere to any other code than what you see in nature? That, again, has led to the current materialism, cruelty, competition, the inequality in the distribution of wealth, etc., because we don't understand that we as human beings, if we want to be happy, we need to begin to obey higher laws than the laws that we see applying to animals or to plants or to minerals. This should be obvious, but it is not. Because we have developed mental and emotional nature, we need to act according to moral laws, to a kind of ethics, which of course there is a lot of criticism to the idea of morality or ethics in this postmodern culture, because the moral and the ethics that we find in the world is often quite narrow, is conditioned by the culture in which that ethics were developed, etc. But the secret doctrine is providing, as I said at the beginning, something else, is providing a universal foundation for a universal ethics. And it is only when we start following a life that is based on this universal ethics that we can be happy. And for this, we need to recognize that higher nature in ourselves, that aspect which I have mentioned, by which we are one with everything, we are eternal, we are far beyond the limitations of our personal nature. When we start understanding ourselves from this perspective, of course, not understanding only in terms of an intellectual understanding, which, by the way, is always a first step. We need an intellectual understanding, a solid, sound intellectual understanding, to be the basis for an action, a kind of action that is based on that understanding. If our minds are not clear, our action will be confused. So we do need a clear understanding of these things, and that's why the secret doctrine and other theosophical literature goes to great deal of detail about the constitution of human beings and the process of evolution. But the intellectual understanding is not enough. We need to make a further effort, as the first quotes from the Mahatmas suggest. We need to see how this can be turned into a way of life. And by following a way of life based on these teachings, those things that were at first intellectual concepts gradually are assimilated, and they become realities that are perceived by our spiritual intuition. So we need to start understanding, grasping, first intellectually and then by means of our spiritual intuition, that we are a spiritual entity, that in our true self we are eternal, that in our true nature we need nothing, that all the needs that we perceive in ourselves are the needs of the body or the needs of the emotional nature or the needs of the mind, but we are really beyond that. The problem is that we don't perceive it, and this is where our work lies. We need to work so that gradually we begin to perceive this higher nature. And as that happens, the very being in touch with the higher nature begins to soften the needs of the lower nature, because unconsciously to ourselves, we begin to, let's say, the fulfillment that is an intrinsic part of our true nature begins to filter down unconsciously at first the personality, so that we start having less physical desires, less emotional desires and mental desires or ambition. As we start working to get closer to our higher nature, the totality of the higher nature begins to rule our lives. And of course, that changes radically how we relate to life. We start changing from the point of view of I'm in life to get things, to try to fulfill my needs and desires, etc., we start looking at life as the possibility of giving, of helping. You can see this in your life. When you are happy, you naturally become more generous. When you are worried and afraid, the tendency is to become, less generous and more guarded and more self-protecting. So as we get in touch with our higher nature, we naturally begin to shift from that sense of exploiting life to the sense of contributing to life and to the happiness of other people. And then as I was saying, the way that we relate to life changes radically. But for this, we need to start working on getting closer to our higher nature. This is not the place to talk about this, but in the Theosophical tradition, the study, meditation, service, applying the teachings to our daily life, all these are ways by means of which we get closer to our higher nature. And the last idea that we get two more ideas. The next idea is that everything is alive and conscious. This is a corollary, so to say, of everything that we have been seeing. So Blavatsky says, for example, in The Secret Doctrine, the esoteric philosophy teaches that everything lives and is conscious, but not that all life and consciousness are similar to those of human or even animal beings. It hardly seems possible that science can disguise from itself much longer, by the mere use of terms such as force and energy, the fact that things that have life are living things, whether they be atoms or planets. So what she's saying here is that what life calls force and energy, these are the expressions of life and consciousness. And that although in science they regard this as just, blind material realities, what the Secret Doctrine is proposing is that, as I mentioned earlier, that these are the seeds of what we call life and consciousness. In the Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky was talking about the atoms as being composed of matter, energy, and consciousness. At the time when she wrote this, scientists thought that atoms were just little balls, like billiard balls, with no division, with no motion, with no energy per se. So the atom of gold was a little ball, minute, invisible to the naked eye ball of gold, the smallest that could exist, and you could not break that little ultimate particle of gold. And that's why they were called atoms. The word means non-divisible. Now, Blavatsky said that is not true. The atoms are divisible. They are actually quite active. She said that there was an energy in the atom. And she said that not only that, but there is a consciousness in the atom. So science, after Blavatsky died, with Einstein several decades after The Secret Doctrine, a couple of decades after The Secret Doctrine was written, Einstein brought the idea that energy and matter are actually two aspects of the same thing. That when you have energy, you have matter. When you have matter, you have energy. That these are the same principle behaving in different ways. So science has taken a step forward from the time when Blavatsky wrote The Secret Doctrine, and now knows that energy and matter are both aspects of the same thing. The next step should be to realize that energy and matter are nothing but also a form of consciousness. Just as energy and matter can be interchanged, consciousness can also be interchanged in that way between energy and matter. In other words, wherever there is matter, there is energy and there is consciousness. Or the other way around, where whenever there is consciousness, there will be energy and there will be matter of some kind, not necessarily physical. So this is a view that the secret doctrine brings, which when we start looking at life with the sense that everything is alive, everything is conscious, there is intelligence everywhere, that everything that happens has a purpose, you see how your understanding of life changes radically. Instead of thinking that we are the kings of creation and that we have the right to exploit everything around, we realize that we are actually, we share a kinship with everything around, because our consciousness has come out of those things that we regard today as being non-sentient and being material. And the other point that is important here is that when we say that the atom is conscious, do not fall into the typical mistake in the New Age of thinking that the atom can somehow make decisions in the way that we do, thinking that when we say the atom is conscious, it has some kind of minute human mind. Blavatsky says, let me read again, everything lives and is conscious, but not that all life and consciousness are similar to those of the human being or animals. There is a consciousness of its own in the atom, which is what science calls chemistry. The fact that an atom has affinity with certain elements and not with others. Allegorically speaking, we can say the atom chooses to what other atoms to relate to or not. Of course, that choosing is by means of what we call chemistry, or the laws of chemistry. But again, those laws of chemistry are the result of how consciousness manifests in something as simple as the atom. Similarly, the minerals have a consciousness of their own, plants have a consciousness of their own, animals, celestial beings, etc. It was not too long ago when, for example, Descartes, the French philosopher, would say that animals were not really conscious, and that if you were hurting an animal and you heard the cries of the animal, that was not really an expression of pain. It was just a mechanical sound that comes out of the animal, just as the same happens when you are working with machines that produce sounds. So you see how materialistic the view in the West had become, that we denied consciousness even to animals. We have moved on from there, but there is a long way to go. Understanding that everything is conscious brings a different kind of respect for nature. And this is the foundation for the final point that I want to bring up, that we are a microcosm. What does this mean? Blavatsky says, everything in the universe follows analogy. As above, so below. Man is the microcosm of the universe. That which takes place on the spiritual plane repeats itself on the cosmic plane. The idea is that we as human beings have in ourselves all the forces, all the kinds of consciousness, and all the an interaction with all the types of entities that exist in the universe. You know, we have a physical body that has the kind of consciousness of the atoms and cells, etc. And that forms part of our consciousness. When we say, I feel sick, this is not something that is happening to us as spiritual natures, which cannot be sick. This is, we are feeling the consciousness of the cells of the body. Similarly, with our emotions, this is not something that happens to us as a spiritual consciousness. The emotions are part of elemental energies on the emotional plane. Similarly with our thoughts are part of activity of elementals on the the mental plane. The idea here is that we are a ray of spiritual consciousness that is using all these different kinds of life and consciousnesses as vehicle of expressions. And when I say I'm talking about the addition, the summatory of all these consciousnesses. And that's what I call myself. And this also goes on to higher planes. The consciousness, the energy, the influence of all celestial beings are also part of ourselves. The substance, just like the physical body is drawn from the earth, our other principles are drawn from celestial beings. This is why astrology, this is the foundation for the work of astrology, because the planets are connected to different, or rather the planetary spirits are connected to different aspects of us as a human being. So when we think of ourselves, we must think of ourselves as a miniature copy of the whole cosmos. And just as we have life and consciousness of many different types, the cosmos, the macrocosm, the larger cosmos, has also this kind of life and consciousness, and we are inseparable units of it. So these are a few ideas that the Secret Doctrine proposes. If we meditate on these ideas, if we try to apply these ideas into our daily lives, then we start working or living based on a universal ethics that is good not only for ourselves, but for everything around. In my book, Approaching the Secret Doctrine, I have written about all of this, and I have provided meditations and exercises to see how to apply these teachings in our daily life. So I hope that this can encourage you to draw your own ethical and practical ideas from the Secret Doctrine and from all theosophical literature, and that this can be an inspiration for that.